Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we dig into articles, research, notes, all that good stuff to pull out the insights that matter for you.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Today, we're tackling one of those real head-scratchers from baseball history. How did the Oakland Athletics, a team consistently near the bottom in terms of payroll, how did they win so many games?
Right. Often beating teams spending, what, 3 times as much?
Exactly. And this goes way beyond baseball, really. It's about questioning beliefs.
Yeah.
The stuff everyone thinks they know.
Absolutely. So for this deep dive, we're going to unpack the sources you sent over about the A's, their whole revolutionary thing.
Okay.
The mission, really, is to look at the surprising facts, that big clash between the old guard and the data guys, and figure out how this bunch of supposedly undervalued players became such a powerhouse. It's kind of a shortcut, really, to seeing how sharp analysis can shake things up anywhere.
And what a shakeup it was needed. I mean, picture the early 2000s. Baseball was basically a money game.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the Yankees throwing around, what was it, $126 million?
Something like it, yeah. Massive.
While the A's had less than a third of that, maybe $40 million. And that gap was widening fast compared to, say, 10 years before.
Right. Back then, it was like $44 million at the top, maybe $8 million at the bottom. The scale just exploded.
And everyone just knew, right? Poor teams get the maimed and the inept. They're almost certain to fail.
That was the gospel. But the A's, well, they weren't buying it.
Which brings us straight to that core problem.
Yeah.
The whole setup felt like an unfair game, didn't it? Driven by just old thinking.
Totally unfair. That financial gulf, Yankees, $126 million. A's in Tampa Bay down around $40 million. It just created this feeling that only the rich kids could play, basically. Success seemed bought.
So how did someone like Doug Pappas, the baseball finance guy, how did he cut through that? How did he show what the A's were really doing?
Pappas came up with this really clever metric. He looked at how much teams paid for each win above a baseline. Like what a team full of minimum wage players might get, say 49 wins.
Okay, so isolating the cost of actually winning beyond just showing up.
Exactly. And his numbers showed the A's spent about $500,000 per win over that baseline.
$500,000. And the others. The profligate rich franchises.
Yeah. Teams like the Orioles, the Rangers, they were dropping nearly $3 million per win.
Wow.
6 times what Oakland paid. It just hammers home that point, It wasn't just how much they spent, it was how well they spent it. That's the key idea here.
And spending well meant challenging everything, especially how they looked at players, right? That whole eye test thing.
Oh, the eye test. Yeah. Traditional scouting was all about subjective stuff, gut feelings.
You hear those terms like rockhead or soft.
Right. Rockhead, maybe. Okay, you can work with stubborn. Soft. That was bad news. But the absolute killer was bad makeup.
Bad makeup, like that story with Phil Milo, the old A's guy.
Oh, yeah. Classic. When Paul DePodesta, Beane's assistant, got hired, Milo apparently just walks up and says, "I'm really not pleased we hired you." Yeah. That's bad makeup in action. Or at least that's how the old guard saw it.
So the scouts were looking at, like, the body, projecting potential, not what the guy had actually done.
Pretty much. They wanted the good face, the good body, what a player might become, focusing on actual past performance. That was performance scouting, and they kind of sneered at it.
It sounds completely backwards now.
Doesn't it? And Billy Beane's own story just underlines how flawed that was. He was the can't-miss kid, drafted high, looked the part.
Then didn't hit.
Exactly. Failed as a pro. He talked about feeling claustrophobia in the batter's box, hitting with fear. His stats told an eloquent tale of suffering, as the source put it.
Wow.
Even his old coach said he would have made it if he just had, the intangibles of better self-image.
So that failure directly fueled his later approach. It showed him firsthand how wrong the eye test could be.
Had to, right? It's a powerful demonstration of that core problem relying on looks over substance.
And the sources mentioned even early stabs at psychology in baseball. Bit different from Beane's data focus, but related.
Yeah, a bit. Way back in the 40s, there's this guy, David Tracy, doing hypnosis on players.
Bit weird.
Hypnosis.
Seriously?
Seriously. Then later in the 80s, the A's had Harvey Dorfman, author of The Mental Game of Baseball. His idea was, for talented guys struggling with failure, you got to kind of suck it up and let the kid develop. Don't humiliate them.
So, sort of protecting the asset. Psychologically.
Right, which clashed with that traditional tough-it-out baseball culture. It highlights that tension.
Okay, that really sets up the revolution, doesn't it? Part 2, science and strategy. Where did the ideas really come from?
Well, the big name, the intellectual godfather, is Bill James.
Ah, the numbers guy.
Yeah, but he wasn't just a numbers guy. He was an economist, literature student, saw stats as having the powers of language. He self-published his first baseball abstract in '77, photocopied, stapled, tiny budget.
68 pages, right. Cost him like $100.
Something like that, yeah. And it was just these short, punchy paragraphs, then pages of number.
Didn't exactly fly off the shelves initially, I gather. 75 copies.
No, not a bestseller. But his insight was huge. He basically said, look, maybe 80% of what announcers tell you, it's just, well, complete bullshit, to use his term.
And people started listening. That must have created a demand for actual analysis.
It really did. James showed again and again how data could just blow up these cherished myths. It proved common wisdom could be dead wrong. That's another recurring theme here.
So how did those ideas jump from his abstracts into the A's front office?
That was Sandy Alderson, the A's GM, former Marine. He found James's work and started thinking differently. He even got this aerospace engineer, Eric Walker, to write a pamphlet.
An aerospace engineer?
Yeah, and this pamphlet said fielding, maybe 5% of the game, tops. The real key, it argued, was on-base percentage, OBP.
OBP, getting on base.
Right, because it measures the one thing you don't want a batter to do.
Yeah.
Make an out. That became their North Star. Focus on what actually wins games, not just flashy plays. It's about reiterating that focus on true value.
So OBP was king. What other metrics did they really latch onto? How did that change things?
Well, along with OBP, they looked hard at slugging percentage, SLG. That's about power hitting.
Got it.
And they found that just adding those two together, OBP plus SLG, or OPS, was a much better predictor of how many runs a team would score than, say, batting average or RBIs, the traditional stats.
Simpler, but more effective.
Much more. It was a huge shift away from stats that look good but don't capture the whole picture of creating runs. Back to that core idea, measure what matters for winning.
And then DePodesta brought in ideas from Wall Street, expected run value. It sounds complex.
It was pretty advanced for baseball then. He was influenced by traders who used derivative analysis. They built this system to figure out how every single event on the field, a walk, a single, an out, changed a team's probability of score.
Oh.
And the key thing, it tried to extract the element of luck. It challenged that old baseball saying that luck just, evens out. They wanted to quantify the skill part, real analytical rigor.
Fascinating. And it wasn't just hitting, right? There was that wild theory about pitching from Voros McCracken.
Oh, yeah, McCracken, over on baseballprospectus.com. His idea was radical for pitchers, preventing hits on balls put in play. Mostly luck.
Seriously. So all that stuff about a pitcher's stuff.
McCracken argued the only things a pitcher consistently controlled were walks, home runs allowed, and strikeouts. Everything else, once the ball was hit fair, was kind of random or down to the defense.
That must have blown people's minds. Completely against traditional wisdom.
Absolutely. Just another example of data revealing something totally counterintuitive, another core insight they leaned on.
Okay, so they've got the theory, the metrics. Now, part 3, putting it into action. The 2002 draft sounds like a huge turning point.
Massive. They lost their 3 big stars, Giambi, Damon, Isringhausen, to free agency. Rich teams snapped them up.
Right. Looked like disaster.
But because of the compensation rules, they got awarded 7 first-round draft picks. Unheard of.
7 picks. Wow.
And Beane's attitude was basically, look, whatever we did before was wrong. We can't be more wrong than that. Time for a new approach.
And that meant totally ignoring the look.
Right.
What were those draft meetings actually like?
Apparently they were something else. You had the scouts talking about bad makeup, rock head, soft, looking at psych tests. Remember Lark scoring 1 out of 10 on everything?
Yeah, leadership drive, not great scores.
Not great. But Beane and DePodesta, they were focused on performance scouting. What has this guy actually done? Not does he look like a future star. That shift, again, from subjective to objective, it's central.
So they deliberately went after the oddballs, the guys everyone else dismissed.
Pretty much. Beane said they looked for guys with something about him that causes everyone else to overlook him, and I know that it is something that just doesn't matter.
Like Jeremy Brown, the catcher.
Exactly. The fat catcher. Everyone thought his body type was wrong for baseball, expected to go super late in the draft, maybe 15th round or later. The A's grabbed him in the 2nd round, offered him less money, sure, but they saw the hitting ability.
Call Marino, the guy with...
The titties, yeah.
Yeah.
Ambidextrous first baseman. Coaches literally reported that physical detail back to Billy. But could he hit? That's what mattered. It perfectly illustrates finding value where others saw flaws, exploiting those market inefficiencies.
So it wasn't about finding one guy to replace Giambi. It was about piecing together his production from several overlooked players.
Precisely. Recreate the aggregate, not the individual superstar. They brought in guys like David Justice, Jeremy Giambi, Jason's brother, and Scott Hatteberg, all seen as damaged goods by other teams.
Hatteberg's story really stands out there. Catcher who couldn't throw anymore.
Yeah, career looked over, nerve damage in his elbow. The Rockies basically gave up on him, let him go free when he wouldn't take a pay cut. Worthless, they thought.
But the A's saw something else.
They saw his hitting approach. Patient, thoughtful, disciplined. High OBP, walked more than he struck out. The Red Sox, his old team, actually saw that patience as a weakness. They wanted guys banging their chests, being aggressive.
Wow. Different philosophies.
Totally. Hatteberg wasn't afraid to strike out looking if it meant taking his walks. The A's converted him to first base and got huge value out of him. Again, valuing patience and discipline over just raw, sometimes reckless aggression.
And Beane wasn't just picking players. He was deep in the day-to-day strategy too, right? Even overriding the manager.
Oh, completely. Ran the whole show. He'd be deciding on bunts, steals, lineups, bullpen moves, stuff usually left to the field manager, Art Howe.
So Howe was just there.
Pretty much left entirely in the dark on player moves. He got called the steady hand on the tiller, mostly because he looked calm and professional, not because he was actually steering the ship. Billy wanted every decision rooted in the data.
Must have caused friction with players used to the old ways, though, like Tejada.
Oh yeah, Miguel Tejada. Came from the Dominican Republic, where the mentality was hack your way off the island, swing at everything. The A's tried hard to get him to be more selective, but it was tough to break those ingrained habits.
So how do you manage that?
Well, David Justice had this great insight. He said, facing a pitcher with real command, you gotta kind of give up on the idea that you're going to get rich and satisfy yourself with just making a living. Take what the pitcher gives you. It shows that conflict between instinct and the A's disciplined analytical approach.
And Beane kept finding value mid-season too, right? That fucking A-trade strategy?
Yeah. That was his term. He'd wait for bad teams to give up around the trade deadline and start dumping salaries. Then he'd swoop in.
Aggressive negotiator.
Legendary. Like when he got Cliff Floyd, he basically played the Red Sox, who also wanted Floyd, against the Mets. Used that leverage not just to get Floyd cheap, but also to pry away Kevin Youkilis from Boston's farm system.
Youkilis. The guy he called the fat double-A third baseman.
That's the one. But Beane knew his numbers. Called him the Greek god of walks. Highest OBP in the minors after Barry Bonds. Just relentless exploitation of market inefficiencies, finding value others missed. It's the same core strategy applied again.
Okay, so the system's working, they're winning.
Yeah.
But baseball wasn't exactly rolling out the red carpet, was it? Part 4, validation and resistance.
Not at all. Lots of resistance. The sources call them elephant man moments. Like GMs would hire one stats guy, not out of genuine curiosity, but basically to shut up the other 75 guys trying to trade them junk.
Pay off one to keep the others away.
Pretty much. And the industry looked down on these guys. Like Mike Gimbel, community college dropout, rotisserie league fanatic, had pet caimans raided from his loft.
Pet caimans.
Seriously. The attitude was, how could this weirdo know anything about baseball? Total disdain for outsiders.
A fierce unwillingness to rethink anything, as the source says.
Exactly. And Beane hated the cliches, especially clutch hitting. He thought it was pure luck, said he'd rather watch financial news than listen to announcers talk about it.
So just rejecting those narratives completely.
If they weren't backed by data, yes. Back to statistically sound principles over superstition.
But even Beane admitted his system wasn't magic in the playoffs, right? My shit doesn't work in the playoffs.
Yeah, he was brutally honest about that. My job is to get us to the playoffs. What happens after that is fucking luck. No secret postseason recipe.
Why? What's the thinking there?
It's the sample size. Pete Palmer, the sabermetrician, figured the difference in a game due to skill is maybe 1 run. Due to luck. Could be 4 runs. Over 162 games, skill wins out, luck averages out. But in a short 5 or 7 game series, anything can happen. Luck plays a huge role. The structure of the playoffs kind of mocks reason in a way. It's a key analytical distinction. Long-term process versus short-term randomness.
And the old guard kept pushing back, even during the playoffs. Like Joe Morgan.
Joe Morgan. Hall of Famer, broadcaster. He really spoke for all insiders. He was constantly on the A's case for not manufacturing runs, bunting, stealing.
Even though the stats showed they were scoring more in the playoffs.
Yeah. Exactly. They scored more runs per game in the playoffs than the regular season, but Morgan kept banging that drum. Just shows how deep those traditional biases run, even against clear evidence.
And even within the A's system, the human element still popped up. Chad Bradford, the pitcher.
Yeah, Bradford, the submarine pitcher, weird delivery, low speed, scouts laughed, but he was incredibly effective because hitters weren't used to it.
The trickster.
Right. But then he gets some national attention, starts getting talked about, and hits a slump. He admitted he had zero self-confidence, that his whole game relied on deception working perfectly.
So the pressure got to him.
Seemed like it. His pitching coach said Bradford lacked a vocabulary of personal defiance. The stats said he was good, but the human psychology, the self-belief, that was still a factor. Data's crucial, but people are still people.
But despite all that, the Moneyball ideas did start to spread, didn't they?
Slowly, but yes. The Blue Jays hired J.P. Ricciardi from the A's, who then hired Keith Law from Baseball Prospectus. Ricciardi basically told his boss, look, if you can handle the media criticism, I can make this team cheaper and better.
So proving the model was replicable.
Exactly. Once teams were willing to take that leap and handle the heat.
And the biggest validation came from outside baseball with the Red Sox.
Yeah, that was huge. John Henry, the billionaire owner, came from financial markets. He got statistical analysis, saw how it could find inefficiencies. He recognized the same kind of idiocies in the baseball player market.
So he buys the Red Sox and...
First thing he does, hires Bill James, says, I don't understand how it took so long for somebody to hire this guy. Even brought in Voris McCracken. It was like the ultimate stamp of approval from someone who understood markets. The data guys had arrived.
And that led to that moment for Beane himself, right?
Yeah.
The Red Sox offer him the GM job. Huge money, big market.
Massive opportunity, and he really wrestled with it, saw it as a chance to prove his ideas had real dollar value.
But he turned it down?
He did, stayed in Oakland. And then Paul DePodesta, taking over as A's GM, promptly screwed Beane in trade negotiations by getting Kevin Youkilis, the Greek god of walks, back from Boston.
Huh. Perfect ending.
Kind of, yeah. Shows how valuable those insights had become. Everyone wanted a piece of that analytical edge the A's pioneered.
So wrapping this up,
Yeah.
what's the big takeaway here? The story really drives home that smart management, backed by solid data, can overcome pure cash rate.
Absolutely. It proves you can run circles around taller piles of cash. It's all about finding that hidden value, looking where others aren't, seeing past the superficial flaws. That's the recurring lesson.
The core idea really is, it still matters less how much money you have than how well you spend it.
Nailed it. They challenged everything the industry thought it knew and showed that if you do that, you will find ways to do things much better than they are currently done.
So a final thought for you listening. Think about your own world, your industry, maybe even your life. Where are decisions made based on gut feel, tradition, how things look?
Yeah, where's the eye test still ruling?
What opportunities might be hiding there if you just trusted the obvious? Or did what everyone else does? Could applying that kind of analytical deep dive like the A's did unlock something amazing? Something to think about.